In a career spanning more than 50 years, the films and television series produced by Gerry Anderson have enjoyed a lasting popularity both in Britain and all around the world. From Supercar to Thunderbirds to Space 1999, each of his series were not only hugely popular, but also generated vast amounts of merchandising in the form of books, games, and of course toys. It's worth noting that such a vast merchandising empire as the one that sprang up around these shows was unheard of back in the mid-1960s, when so many of his popular TV series were being produced. Nowadays, a successful children's television series may be designed to specifically sell toys, but back in the era of the shows like Thunderbirds and Captain Scarlet, the merchandising evolved out of the programme rather than the other way around. Although it was certainly a useful way to recoup production costs too. It was the appealing designs of the vehicles themselves that captured the hearts and minds of viewers and in turn created the desire for toys based on those craft. Toys that would enable children to create new adventures of their own in the week-long gap between the new TV episodes. Unsurprisingly, the earliest Gerry Anderson products spawned very little merchandise. The Adventures of Twizzle, or Torchy the Battery Boy, arrived on British television in the latter half of the 1950s, long before television and film-based toys became big business in the 1960s. While the several storybooks and annuals based on these series were released, with only other merchandisers came from the Pelham Puppets and the reproductions of the series stars. Pelham Twizzle Puppet is a fair approximation of the character. One might argue it is perhaps slightly more sophisticated than the one that appeared in the television series, but Pelham's Torchy only manages a passing resemblance to the nightmarish television original. Likewise, although 1959's Four Feather Falls was far more successful and technologically accomplished than either of its predecessors, no toys were produced for the series, with the only merchandise available being the usual variety of books, jigsaws and board games, plus an LP featuring Michael Holliday's song from the show. Anderson's next series, Supercar, will prove to be one of the most significant both in terms of the career and the explosion of associated merchandising. Although undeniably rather primitive looking, today the series includes many of the traditional Anderson motifs, such as a secret base housing a sophisticated craft capable of incredible rescues, and the sheer volume of Supercar merchandise produced shows how popular this new format was. As well as the numerous books and games, the Supercar itself was a subject of a number of toys in various scales and qualities. Budgie models seem to have the most closest to the mark, with the die-cast Supercar featuring retractable wings, but another highlight was the battery-operated Supercar from Remco Toys, which was able to move in different directions thanks to the several discs that slotted into the model. Once again, Pelham also produced puppets of several characters in the series, while in 1964 Cecil Coleman would produce a rare Supercar gift set featuring a model of the craft and several small figures that could be placed in front of a cartoon backdrop of the Black Rock Laboratory. For those who fancied being Mike Mercury himself, Decker also produced a reproduction of his costume, while for keeping in touch with the base while on the mission in your Supercar, you could do worse than invest in Merritt's intercom set, being sure to keep the string that held the two tin cans together from getting tangled, of course. After Supercar, Anderson's work moved further into the realms of science fiction with Fireball XL5, featuring the adventures of the World Space Patrol flagship under the command of the heroic Colonel Steve Zodiac. With public interest in all things space-related on the increase, this series was another merchandising dream with potential licenses, featuring the beautiful design of StarCraft in the XL5 and an assortment of fun characters to go along with it. Several models of Firebird were produced. Fairlight brought out a friction drive model on wheels, while a limited edition Airfix kit of Fireball was available through a Lions-made promotional offer. Most fun of all, however, was a flying Fireball rocket from Quasetti, released in the UK through J. Rosenthal, which could be catapult launched up to 100 metres and returned safely to Earth on the end of a parachute. One of the most impressive items released during this time was the Space City playset from MPC. In a sense, there was two toys in one, a surprisingly accurate 21-inch model of Fireball XL5 itself, with detachable Fireball Junior section and firing missiles. and a reproduction of the Space City complex complete with working launch ramp, control tower, and a whole host of supporting craft and other goodies. Although the majority of these are simply plastic vehicles with no extra action features, there's no denying the remarkable ambition behind this set, not to mention the value for money. The Fireball model was also released separately. 2 ranges of XL5 miniature puppets were released by both Peltham and Coleman, while Steve Zodiac's trusty Jetmobile also received the pull back and go toy treatment courtesy of Fairy Light. And with the would-be World Space Patrol captains out there, their merit included a dart-firing rocket gun. Some of the XL5 merchandise also appeared on screen on a couple of occasions, although not in the Fireball XL5 itself. The Flying XL5 model was launched to raise eyebrows from Roger Moore at the start of the Saint episode, The Man Who Liked Toys. While several of the Peltham puppets appeared in the Avengers episode, Death at Bargain Prices. Anderson's next series moved the action from outer space to the ocean depths, as Troy Tempest took charge of the super sub Stingray and encountered undersea aliens both hostile and benign. Today, Stingray often finds itself standing alongside Thunderbirds and Captain Scarlet as one of the jewels in the Gerry Anderson crown. But the amount of merchandise released back in the 1960s was not much more than had been produced for Fireball XL5, and more of the models and toys produced concentrated more on the vehicles than any of the characters. The various manufacturers, including Fairy Light, Plaston and Lone Star, all produced models of Stingray, but with varying degrees of accuracy. Lincoln came closest to capturing the look of the original with the 1964 radio-controlled model that featured lights and sound effects. Again, Airfix produced a model kit of the series Starcraft from a Lion Maze mailing offer, and today that kit is just as hard to find as the previous Fireball XL5 one. Perhaps the most charming was the inflatable Stingray available through a Golden Wonder promotion, allowing would-be aquanauts to chance to patrol their local beaches or swimming pools on the lookout for terrorfish. Speaking of terrorfish, Lakeside produced a beautiful steel friction-powered model of the aquamphibian vehicle, complete with movable eyes, mouth and tail. Despite the craft now sporting black irises, it made it look adorable rather than threatening. This is significant as being one of the only toys released in the 1960s based on this particular vehicle. When it came to toys based on the Stingray characters themselves, Peltham puppets seemed to have been left out this time, and instead both Metoy and Lakeside produced small sets of hand puppets. For those who wanted to be a real-life Troy Tempest, there was also a Stingray-shaped water pistol produced by Fairy Light and a metal cap gun from Lone Star. It was Gerry Anderson's next series that will ultimately define his career, as well as firmly establish his television shows as a merchandising force to be reckoned with. Thunderbirds arrived on British television in September 1965, and the weekly adventures of the International Rescue soon became fan favourites with children and adults alike. As well as being a smash hit on television, Thunderbirds quickly became a merchandising phenomenon. It would be almost impossible to list all the toys here, but amongst the most successful and best remembered were the die-cast models from Dinky Toys. The first of these was Lady Penelope's famous pink Rolls-Royce Fab 1, featuring firing missiles in the front and harpoons in the back, plus a model of Penelope and Parker. But this toy was soon followed by something even more special. Dinky's Thunderbird 2, perhaps the closest of any Gerry Anderson toy that has come to resemble its screen counterpart up to this point, featured pop-down legs and a detachable central pod, which opened to reveal, as often easily lost, the Thunderbird 4 inside. This toy became one of the most iconic Anderson toys of all time. So much so that it's still being produced well into the next decade, sometimes appearing in the shade of metallic blue rather than its traditional green, and the mint condition examples command a high price today. In conjunction with Rosenthal, Century 21 produced large-scale plastic versions of the 5 Thunderbird crafts, plus Fab 1, and several of those were available in both friction-powered and battery-powered versions. Thunderbird 4 was even capable of moving in water with those inevitable bath time rescues. In perhaps the ultimate example of product placement in the Anderson series, equalled only by Joe 90 being seen to read the copy of the TV 21 comic a few years later, the Rosenthal Thunderbird 1, 2 and 3 toys appeared at the start of Give or Take a Million, the final episode of Thunderbirds. Interestingly, Thunderbird 5 was not included in this group, as it was felt that the model didn't look anything like the vehicle it was based on. It wasn't only the vehicles that were attractive to merchandisers. Fairlight produced a range of 10 dolls based on characters from the series, each one about 12 inches tall, featuring fully jointed bodies and wearing cloth costumes. Figures of this kind were not common in the 1960s, with the result that only a limited run were produced. Today, if you can find them, you can expect each of the fairy tale figures to sell for over £100 each. A big screen adaptation of Thunderbirds arrived in the cinemas in 1966 with a deluxe radio-controlled version of its main guest vehicle, the Zero X, was featured by Century 21 to tie in with the release. Unfortunately, the Thunderbirds I Go film proved to be both a critical and commercial disappointment and marked the beginning of the end for Thunderbirds. Despite the show's unparalleled success and massive merchandising empire that had been constructed around it, Lou Grade felt that an entire new series was the way forward and refused to recommission Thunderbirds. The series came to an end just 6 episodes into the show's second season. Undeterred, Anderson got to work on his next series. The result was a show that, if not quite reaching the same heights as Thunderbirds, still came pretty close. Captain Scarlet and the Mysterons first aired in 1967, and the success of Thunderbirds left Century 21 in no doubt that this new series would do equally well both on television and in the nation's toy stores. Among the most sought after Scarlet toys today are the 3 10-inch vehicles produced by Century 21, the Spectrum Pursuit Vehicle, Spectrum Patrol Car and the Angel Interceptor. These replicas came with a variety of action features, such as opening doors and firing missiles, plus a friction drive motor, but their plastic and polystyrene construction made them rather fragile. As a result, those hoping to find those toys in mint condition today can expect to pay at least £300 minimum. Dinky Toys also produce a range of 3 smaller but sturdier toys to accompany the series: the SPV, the SPC, once again, now joined by the Spectrum Maximum Security Vehicle. The latter was an odd choice considering the MSV was only appeared in 3 episodes of the show. Surely the Angel Interceptor would have been more popular, but the Spectrum Pursuit Vehicle became one of the best-selling dinky toys of all time and remained in the catalogue well into the mid-1970s. The Angel Interceptor was eventually spotlighted when Airfix produced a 1/72 scale kit of the model, which has been recently re-released. Triang Rovex seemed to have developed a minor obsession with the Spectrum Patrol Car in particular, producing 3 sets with the Magic Car system, a precursor to Scale Electric, battery operated and coming with a circuit of track, an extra vehicle to race against. These sets usually fetch upwards of £200 today when in good condition. On the character front, the Pedigree produced a 12-inch action figure doll of Scarlet himself, of a much higher quality of the similar ones Fairlight had produced for Thunderbirds, as well as smaller dolls of Scarlet and Destiny Angel, moulded on a wire frame. Those bendy rubber dolls are generally rather fragile, with overlong spindly limbs and easily lost accessories. So that's the end of part 1 of Gerry Anderson Toys. Coming up in part 2, Joe 90, The Secret Service, UFO, Space 1999 and Terrorhawks. So please like and subscribe, and watch out for part 2 very soon. May the toys be with you.